Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Your gas is free. Your gas is free. In a debt-based economy. Here's the Webster Report with Paul the Gasman Webster.
I'll get that right one week. Hello, good evening and welcome to another Webster Report on this, the 24th of November 2024. There's a slight change to the programme tonight. We were looking forward to having Anthony Brennan on, who was going to tell us his story about what he's been doing in regard to all different kinds of things with family court, social service, etc. But due to personal reasons, he's had to cancel just this morning. So anybody who was looking forward to that, we'll keep you updated on when Anthony can get back in touch, which will probably be looking into the new year now. So we keep Anthony and his family in our prayers as we all see ourselves going through strange times, interesting times, as the Chinese say. So a lot of things to talk about as per usual. I've been battling down the hatches on the coast with Storm Bert. I've been a bit rainy and a bit windy. That was about it. It's, you know, considering it was allegedly this big storm, I was expecting it to be worse, but you know, God bless that it was just still a nice, relaxing week. But in the news, it's the same old. All the arguments are going on. Keir Starmer this, they want him out. I've just become aware that there's a petition done that, you know, when the petition went up, millions have signed it to get Keir Starmer out. As we've discussed before, getting Starmer out is one thing, but getting the manifesto of the Labour Party that people have voted in for 4 years is a different kettle of what's-its. You know, I'm hearing that Farage is, you know, going to come galloping in on a white horse and save our country and everything, that like Mr. Trump over in the US. So there's a lot of things changing. We've also got to look forward to the gas bills going up in the new year. So the elderly who can't afford to pay their bills anyway, and have had the winter allowance took off them, are going to look forward to their bills going up when we're still in the middle of winter. Again, we've talked about this so many times now, that the people have got to understand that operating as a debtor in a debt-based economy is the wrong thing to do. Do your due diligence and go and read this stuff. See what you can do, the little bits that you can challenge on. I know there are many people coming along now, like what Nick was talking about last week, groups and assemblies coming together, that people know there's something wrong. The problem is we've got a challenge on time now. Who's winning? We're following a narrative. We're just the donkeys that do things. So we've got to start coming together. I know we say it every week, Alex. We've got to come together. We've got to come together. How are we doing? Are we coming together?
That was a donkey impression. Yeah.
It's better than your South African accent, mate, anyway.
Hey, I might try South African donkey yet. Don't know you do that. But, you know, we're crossing everything these days, aren't we? Hybrid this, hybrid that. So I don't see why a South African donkey would sound much different to an English one. I was thinking actually, Paul, just because like when you were on air there and I was off like behind the scenes, I was thinking, well, you know, here we go. We've had a cancellation, which you sometimes get. But I thought, well, the theme itself's interesting, so we could still touch on some of the underlying ideas. Because I know obviously there's a focus on homelessness as well as personal struggle in the courts. which is obviously thematic. And it made me think about something that I first looked at when I started my theological training in 1990 at Theological College. And we did this set of modules in social theology. So you have pastoral theology, social theology, biblical languages, philosophical theology, apologetics, all that kind of stuff. And looking at this situation, and we did stuff on it was Christian theology, Christian education, Christian social action. Was it the one? Christian social ethics. But the point was, when I looked at it, studied quite a few documents, and at the time, in the late 80s, early 1990s, this was when the beginning of this social justice emphasis took place. Now, without getting too complex, you can trace the timeline back to Karl Marx and socialism, but not just exclusively to that. And social justice has been picked up on by feminists as well, many other sorts of fringe groups. And there's a reason for that, actually. I've often pondered it. It's worth thinking about, because although it's a theoretical thing, since we're not able to have like the narrative account from our guest, we can look at it on a theoretical level. And one of the things that strikes me is we have a problem with social justice because the word justice itself describes, usually in people's mind, a set of fixed conditions. Now, when you were on this course, we often talked about Christian social responsibility, not Christian social justice. We talked about Christian social action. Action is good because it's a form of responsibility, even though it could be negative action. But social justice could imply a Marxist sort of, or a Marxian, more accurately, utopian vision of a perfect society where somebody's developed the blueprint. And it's not religious, it's not Jesus Christ, it's not Buddha, it's not any of the earlier ideologues and liberals of society, liberals in the best sense, traditional British liberals and English liberals who wanted to build a vision of society that was successful, utilitarian, and benefited everyone. But this vision could be a very sinister vision. And of course, as we know, Starmer's influenced massively, was a Trotskyite, and influenced quite a Bolshevik in tendency. And at the end of the day, he was massively influenced by those communist ideas. So we know he's got a blueprint of society because we're seeing it now. His blueprint of society is let a bunch of criminals loose, let a bunch of migrants in to engage in a culture war that destroys the fabric of this nation and imprison people for tweets that he doesn't like. So we have got a police state, and we're getting all this furore now from Musk and Trump, and it's getting interesting.
They're reducing prison sentences. They're reducing prison sentences to get people out, and they're already in for murder, all kinds, and they're having sentences reduced so they can free up spaces. Believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, again, that's all part of an overarching strategy with an ideology behind it that can be articulated. But generally, they're not articulating it really. They want it to remain covert, because if it's stated, articulated publicly, it can be criticised. So it's like all under the radar, all under the surface, hidden behind a particular vision of law and order. Who can disagree with law and order to some degree? So it's just who's defining what the vision of law and order is. So I think with social justice, it's such an empty container that you can fill. So again, just touching now, not just from social justice, Andy Burnham, when he's also taking sleeping bags off the homeless in the streets of Manchester as this lofty murder he is. But even in the family courts, the whole thing about the rights of women and men in custodial situations, which is one of the things that would have been talked about. Well, we know now that feminists have ideas, strong ideas about social justice. They have strong ideas about reproductive justice. And those views are all, no offense to the ladies present, but they're all highly woman-centric. And the court system has, obviously we hear this word patriarchy all the time, and technically a court should be a classic patriarchal structure, but of course courts punish men severely who do not keep, so-called along the patriarchal narrative, they do not keep their women in line. The system comes down and virtually destroys those men, rapes them financially. And at the end of the day, what we're finding as well in benefit culture, welfare state used to be there for people who really deserved it, needed it, because that's what we paid taxes into. But now we've taught people You know, so for example, when you say, no offense again, not just to ladies, but to single mothers, when you teach a young kid, a young girl with very few prospects, maybe in teenage years, that her best prospect in life is to get pregnant early so she can get a house, get all the benefits paid for, not aspire ever to drive, get an education or do very much, not worry about being in a stable relationship because she's a viable individual, but simply rely on the state because it can provide better than some young lad who she might be considering dating in his early 20s who's not established himself yet. That young lad's got very little chance. And the message, and feminism then doubles down in many of its forms, not all of them. There is a legitimate basis to some forms of feminism, but the extreme radical ones, particularly the TERFs that you see now, the trans excluding radical feminists and third wave radical feminists, they're just piling more and more misery by saying, you know, men are the problem. And although they would attack a patriarchal court system, they will agree with the punishments of men. So everyone then gleefully steps on board. And the vision of justice then is a very fringe group narrative of power that says white middle class men in Western societies with education, that they are the oppressors and everybody else is just the victim. Now, the problem with that is it filters not just through the ideology and on social media, it gets into our court systems, it gets into our education systems, it becomes an infection that infects everything. So it isn't really about individual men and women. It might look like that, and each case, each party can, you know, express their woes about the other side and say, oh, men, oh, women. But it's a much deeper cultural problem that we've got, Paul, that we need to address. And when we look at social justice, the point I'm making is when we've got very fixed ideas about what social justice is, it means the people who control the narrative can define it with their vision of social justice that's on the throne and everybody else gets squashed by it. But if it's social responsibility, that's much better. Because then even David Cameron's Big Society, which is a bit of a taxpayer con, like to save money and then not have to spend on services, the underlying principle of everybody stepping up in a big society where individuals participated, it's not a bad thing. That's responsibility. Now, if we all, like last week when we looked at community assemblies, that's an example. When you're looking at the tenants associations and so on, you're looking at people coming together there, acting together, building community in a way that's like not portrayed as they always do, a bunch of conspiracy theories. It's portrayed as people in the community stepping up, wanting to bring about positive change. So for me, I think we need to start looking at language, the language we use, and we need to start not attacking ideas like social justice, but pointing out why they're not adequate. It's about responsibility. It's about people stepping up. Because if we don't, it's always about blame. I've got less power than you. I can't speak. And it could apply on the chat tonight. Like people could come on later on if they wanted. And we can all operate on whatever level. So you can either be a constructive contributor in the chat, or you could be a keyboard warrior, not offering very much. Now, it's down to every individual, whatever level that they're operating, to decide whether what they are contributing is responsible, is adding to the social fabric, right? Or is taking away from the social fabric. We've got too many parasites in our culture these days. Take. And as inflation kicks in, rents go up, everything else goes up. Then a decent, just person might think, well, I put my prices up in my head, but if I do that, I'm part of the problem. So we need people who've got the integrity and strength to buck the trend, because it's like, you know, that line that Jesus had, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. You get a little bit of chaos, what we would call as Christians sin in the system, and over time it's mission creep, and then it takes over the whole house, and then nobody knows what to do about it.
Well, it's not that nobody knows what to do about it. Nobody thinks there's anything to do about it because everything's normal. You know, everything's been normalized. Certainly since the 50s, everything went haywire with the music, the entertainment, the drugs, everything over that 20-year period, I'd say. Late 50s to the late 70s, that 20-year period, that was chaotic. You know, what come out of that is what we're seeing now. And we've seen those hard times create those hard men create those great times. Those great times have now created soft men. And we're now at this fulcrum. You know, they believe that the world's there for the taking at the minute by the look of things, Alex. Yeah. You know, they saw how people reacted 4 years ago, when they just went, when they actually just published constantly the actual figures of death by ordinary flu every year that nobody cares about. The same figures were just being shown on the screen constantly. And when you looked at it, it was a 0.000% chance of dying from this. And you think, why would you go and do something when you've got such a great chance of nothing going wrong? But it was that psycho shock, the shock that I saw ripple through. And funnily enough, how these conspiracy theories, Alex, they never pan out, do they? They always just seem weird and they never fulfill anything. Well, there was a conspiracy theory started 2017 going into 2019 when it got removed, and it's come up on memories and people are talking about it now, that next year we were talking about Project 2025 with what's coming through the executive orders and things like that. Well, there's a thing called Deagle.com, which is a trends forecast. Well, they were doing a forecast on all different things for all different countries. And it wasn't just things like what the economy was going to be like or anything like that, but it was population. And back in 2017, the population was just over 66 million for this country. By 2025, they forecast that it would only be 15 million. And it lists all these other countries. It's been published today. Lists all these other countries of how much the population has been slashed. Now we're talking 3/4 of a population. What does that entail? Because that is only the theory at the minute, because we've not got there. But
only 2 months away.
Well,
two months away.
But when we were talking, this is where we start to, you seem to be looking at the world and then looking at the Bible, and you're starting to see things that are playing out. The scriptures say that so many parts of the population will be gone, and these are forecasting that. It's not like they're predicting it. They're looking at trends and saying, this is what we forecast for that year. No, we could sit around and watch I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here and say that's a load of crap. I've got a life. I've not got time to look at that. But I don't see any alternative now, because the problem that we've got, Alex, is if we're at that stage, time's getting quicker and quicker and time's running out. As we know that the Bible and the scriptures, I know that it's true because it's the only truth that I've found, that all the liars agree is wrong. I just didn't know how to believe it until I believed it. All I kept doing was reading it and trying to get an understanding of it. Because if that's true, mate, I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here. Well, you're miles off, because this is eternity. And the alternative is that if that's wrong, that means we all go to heaven and we all laugh about it after. Or the alternative is that's right and everybody else has made the choice. It's not that. I spoke with somebody recently who asked me why God would punish people who are doing that, because they might still be loving people. It's not. You're clearly told you can do what you want. I've given you free will and I love you, and you can go and do that. But there's a consequence to whatever it is you do. Paul said that everything is lawful for me to do, but not everything edifies. And that was why I knew the stuff that I loved doing wasn't edifying me, because I understood it. But I could still go and do it. But then I've made that choice to be apart from God. I had a conversation with a mate today, and we were talking, for some reason we ended up talking about hell. I said, well, imagine being detached from any life force of God. And just like there was one atheist who was debating John Lennox, and he said that he just believes that there's nothing when he dies. Well, what if is exactly what he gets is nothing around him forever, just him? That's not brilliant. That could be like a hell or whatever, couldn't it? We just don't know how this black and white stuff is. That's why you look around, mate. with all the lies that we've been living, unbeknownst to us, it should have been sparking people. At least COVID woke a few people up to what was going on in this world. It's now they just got to knit this stuff together, because we know it's almost everybody you speak to admits that there's a spiritual battle going on.
Yeah. Well, the problem is the same old problem that we've got when you bring. I mean, obviously, we have to say religion, but we mean, from our perspective, faith in the Bible. And it's, how do you get from the book or from the page to 3D reality? So we know that Saul of Tarsus, who became the Apostle Paul, had a conversion on the Damascus Road. That's according to the literature, for those people who don't believe it's literal or it's the word of God. They just believe it's a story. But the bottom line is, this Saul of Tarsus guy was a zealous Jew, trained Pharisee, tent maker. And he was basically, an honest to goodness guy, but he was so zealous about his religion that he zealously started to kill Christians because he didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. Now, when you have on the Damascus Road the risen Jesus Christ, not too many, I don't know, maybe a year or two after his resurrection and ascension, suddenly he appears in the heavens and speaks with a thunderous voice, and kind of blinds Saul, who eventually becomes Paul, and he has to go to the house of Cornelius, the Roman, and basically something eventually like scales fall from his eyes. Well, you've got a strong story-based metaphor, even if you didn't believe it was literal, for the power of an encounter with God. Well, that's got it off the page, because Paul, formerly Saul, was reading the page. He'd been reading the laws all his life, and it hadn't got him anywhere other than persecuting the Jewish Messiah, who he claimed to want to believe in. So even he couldn't translate from the knowledge he had from his own scriptures, from his own tradition. He couldn't equate that with the promise of God.
That was the difference, though, Alex. As soon as that Holy Spirit was put into him, all them scriptures that he knew verbatim, all of a sudden made sense to him, and he realized what he'd been doing. And that is the conviction. That's the conviction of what changes a man. Because, we've discussed it so many times, people who say that the Christians and the lifestyles that we know those Christians live aren't Christian. I know I've lived that lifestyle, and I know I could not have changed. I couldn't have stopped doing that without something convicting me and completely changing me. It's not something I could have just done.
It's funny, Paul, because in light with what you said, when you're saying about the Holy Spirit opening up the scriptures so that Saul could be convicted, accept and recognize that this was sort of Christ in front of him. Well, one was an experience, the other was scripture brought to light, not quite the same but connected. But in Acts 6, of course, Paul is there, formerly Saul at the time, when Stephen is stoned. And it says that Stephen goes all the way through the history, which had happened with Peter and John earlier on, with the guy at the portico in Acts 3, who the beggar, the lame beggar. They open up the scriptures telling from the beginning, from the Jewish story, right through up until Jesus, and what happened. They told the whole story, and it was really powerful. And it happened again in Acts 6 before Stephen was stoned. That's why they stoned him. But there it was. Okay, so after like a mantle laid at his feet, symbolically, afterwards, Stephen gives up the ghost, dies. But Saul, having heard that inspired scripture, isn't converted there and then. It's a bit later on, independently of that. So we've still got that gap between the revelation, when we see the effects because the Spirit of God brings that scripture to life and the person has a conversion experience. There's still this gap. And it's the same like with viewers who don't believe now or believe in the New Age or other religions or are atheists in a very complex world. The question is, how do we get them from that text in a book, which if they don't open it, they're not going to get that revelation anyway. In the world in which we're living, in a marketplace of ideas, getting that gospel across in words or by competing truth claims, very difficult, because everyone's got, I heard it, I went to Sunday school when I was a kid and church was full of hypocrites. So all these people have these stock answers. So it's very, very difficult to make the case that they're wrong because their experiences are largely, a lot of the time, correct. That's why they're not believers. That's why they left the church. So we have to sort of really take these questions very seriously. How do we, and the answer in short is what I've said many times. If we don't embody it, if Christians don't embody it, and in the church a lot of the time, look at what has happened under COVID with the masks. Look at what happened with Justin Welby. So the churches, the mainstream churches, have totally sold out and are not an example. They're not the light. They're the darkness. The darkness has crept into the church. So where can people who would normally have possibly seen the gospel message in a church, and then they don't see in a church, they see a bunch of middle-class people a lot of the time commuting in from the suburbs into some sort of town centre, city centre setting, and they've got like wire meshing on windows to stop all the local youth smashing the windows. And they've got almost like security guards to stop them trashing the building when they come into the youth club. I mean, it's like a picture of two different worlds, middle class, working class, and some veneer of Christianity. Now, you know, I challenge any of those kids in the youth club to just respond to that at the level that the church has been operating. So the question is, where is this light? Because it's supposed to exist in Christians. And Jesus said, because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of most people will grow cold. When he comes back, will he find faith on the earth? Expecting the answer no. So we know it's going to be like almost like apocalyptic conditions, really, really serious, lots of attrition in people's lives, like we're seeing now, like lawlessness everywhere. So we've got to factor in the fact that in this spiritual warfare that we don't see it directly. There's a lot of blinding of people's minds and hearts. There's lots of ideologies, like I mentioned, with a lot of the feminist stuff, the trans stuff, all this identity politics is just creating this mass energy field of corruption and confusion. So the question remains, how are we going to embody the message if people's ears and eyes are closed? I'm not 100% sure. I've just highlighted what the challenge is, and we've got to solve it to make the faith credible, a living faith. You know what I mean?
It's time. Time's really moving. You know, things aren't as I don't know. I can't quite explain it. 30 years ago, all the same threats were basically still going on. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, all the same things were, oh, this could happen and that could happen. And then all of a sudden in the last 4 years, Alex, it's gone ding, 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 ding. And all of a sudden you can see this clearing and you go, we're almost here. We're almost here. Whatever it is they're planning is almost coming to a fulcrum now. You know, it seems a lot easier for like even our generation, Alex. When you look back at a generation that went through war, you know, real hardship. You know, if you've run out of crisp and you can't go to the shop till tomorrow, that can be a trauma for some people.
Yeah.
Imagine that compared to what my nan went through, what my mum grew up in. You know, we don't process it that way, and we're not prepared. If all of a sudden everything just turned off, we're just not prepared. There's nobody prepared for it. Jimmy a few weeks back brought up about how we've lost a generation who knew how to do things. You know, unless you can swipe right or watch a YouTube video, there's not a lot of people have knowledge passed down in that aspect anymore. So with that and all the hostelries, all the pubs have gone, all the churches have gone, and the churches that are still there, as you said, they're turning up with these token-like gestures, you know, like almost it's Sunday morning, let's go to church, there's me £5 or there's me tenner, and sing a few hymns and clap my hands and think, right, I've got to go back to normal next week. It's Halloween, so we'll dress our kids up as demons and put all these things out, celebrating a completely different, you know, tact. You know, it's like being in the church and we're having wedding vows to be blessed, and you look over to the left and you see an altar with a big pumpkin on it and bats and everything celebrating Halloween in a church. It's you said the church has lost its way, but it's been guided this way. And all of a sudden now, it's interesting what you said about getting people to get to that point, because all the due diligence that I've ever done through all those conspiracies, from geoengineering to JFK and all that, I've read and consumed everything that I possibly could. You know, if there was anything new that come out, I'd take the new out of it and add it to what I got. But never done my due diligence on that biggest conspiracy ever. I've never done. I have opinions on it, Alex, and as we know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I honestly here had an opinion on something that I'd not read for myself. It was all based on consensus. We've discussed this so many times. And how like pinpoint I have to be with this stuff to grow up thinking Lucifer and Satan are the same, and then when you read scripture and it says, oh no, they're not. It indicates it's something totally different. So you end up not agreeing with so many people who've been reading the Bible, I would have thought, for 30 years or so, and saying, well, we should all be on the same page. I mean, but it's that Holy Spirit. It's that Holy Spirit to give that discernment. And it's not boasting or anything, because I wouldn't have known it. But I just let that, once I started to read that, Alex, I let those words tell me. And because it was the only unique thing from all this crap, this was very unique, because all this crap said it was wrong. So I thought, well, I've never read it. I'm told it's the word of God. It's never changed. I'll let it tell me and see what it says. And it says, let all other men be liars. So when a man says, what God meant to say there was this. Well, I've never been that confident. So I just went, well, it says this. Yeah, but it means this. I went, well, it doesn't to me. So we get into that debate then of, who's right? Well, I've got to go with what I feel the word says it to me. And if it doesn't say it, I don't agree with it. I don't add to it or anything like that. And that was the hardest part of when I first started it. But once I'd started it, I couldn't stop putting it down, because it was so different. No matter how many times have we said, I've read the book of Isaiah again to this week or whatever. And you're getting different things out of it, because, as you said, the book of Isaiah is the Bible in one book. It's all concise. It's, it's amazing the things that we aren't taught and we skip. Like on a mill pond, we get skinned to be taught all this stuff, and we just think we know things. And that's how the BBC bases the news patterns on. You get snippets of everything, and you think you've got a conversation.
I think there's a problem when we look too closely at individual details or individual disputes in theological questions. I think it's more important to look at the general stuff. So when Paul talks about the end times and what would happen, he talks about doctrines of demons in the end times, and that people, even in the churches, would have a form of godliness, but denying its power. And the problem with that, you might just think, well, yeah, it denies the power. But that word power, I think it comes from the Greek word dunamis. It literally is the manifestation of power, that the power is lost. Now, if you look at churches now, they're impotent. They're useless at facing governments. They comply, like all bureaucracies, modern bureaucracies, to policy level doctrine passed down by secular governments that's anti-Christian. So the churches have absolutely very little, the more bureaucratized they are, influence and impact on any serious player. So there's a form of godliness in those hierarchies that clearly deny its power. The problem is when then people see and feel and experience this powerless church, singing its old hymns that don't make any difference, making no impact on people's lives, they seek the power that should have been there that's missing. And then they go to things like the law of correspondence and the law of attraction and Hermes Trismegistus and all the occult and hidden stuff, because that promises to give them the power, because the mage, the magus, the wizard is the one, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, alchemy. So it's all about how are we going to command the power and get the power. And, often it'll be dressed up as, well, we're trying to get the power of good so that we can beat evil. We really believe that if we could get hold of the Philosopher's Stone, we would be imbued with power. It's like Gollum with the ring. There's a power that he thinks that he'll be able to wield, but it starts to possess him. He doesn't possess it. So this is the thing that we find. So then all these other spiritual positions that you see rampant now in a new age, everyone goes and does a cacao ceremony, right? And they go to a gong bath, right? And they think that's being spiritual, right? Oh, well, they might as well have said, well, I went for some entertainment. It was great. I paid 30 quid because I'm a sucker. and a bunch of people. I could have listened to a meditation tape on YouTube, but I went to this thing. I went to a circle. I connected with my tribe, and they've got all this nonsense language, right, to create a fake identity. It's spiritual bypassing, because again, it's social justice. It's a vision of a society in a utopia where I can just attend. You know, I can be a passenger on a bus going somewhere. I don't have to step up. Take up your cross daily and follow me. No, thank you very much. I'll get some of the cosmic ordering in. God is a cosmic gambling machine. In fact, it's not really God. It's just a strange abstract power. And I'm the one operating the JCB of the forklift truck. So if I get the power, then I can get the results. Then it becomes selfish. Oh, I'm manifesting. What are you manifesting? Oh, I'm manifesting that wife I want, or that new car. Oh, yeah, I'm manifesting all that because it's what I want. Oh, well, how does that contribute to social responsibility? Well, it doesn't. It's just a free-for-all. We're all going to the cosmic power, the wind up in the heavens that's there to bless me. Yeah, but what about your neighbour who's not blessed? Well, it doesn't really matter. I'm getting blessed. There's power in this. It really works. Well, of course it's going to work. But what power is underwriting that? The power that left the church is gone. The people outside the church are going to all these other movements and saying, well, at least I feel good. Oh, I drunk some chocolate, you know, and oh, I'm telling myself I feel fantastic. Yeah, but what did you do? What did you do? How did your life change? Are you mistreating your partner? Are you doing this? Are you actually passing the tests of what it is to be a sound human being? No, you're not. So you can call it what you want. So for me, that's the problem that we face on all these levels. An apostate and corrupt church that does not fulfill the promise, having a form of godliness but denying its power, just means that all these outside influences that go for power directly and put in the hands of man, they're having a field day. And how do we compete with that? Because obviously it's an easy ride, it's a shortcut. Yeah, I just put my Power Rangers uniform on, hit me triangle, bing, you know, do me cosmic ordering, and I got my car arrived. Well, who's going to want to go through suffering, trials, tribulations to build a character, persevere? Everyone wants a nice, easy bed made for them by somebody else, by the maid, you know, scented, very lovely, and they don't have to do any work. Well, good luck with that. This is where it's got us.
I don't really know what to say to that, mate.
Not much you can say, isn't it? But at the end of the day, everyone's got free will again. So they've still got to make their choices based on the experiences that they're having. And again, it's where does our choice begin and end, and where does God draw people to himself? You know, this is the old question about grace versus free will, Paul.
Well, we spoke about this earlier on in the week, because with all that free will, I'd made all these mistakes, not knowing they were mistakes at the time. I've just made all these decisions. Yeah. I got to that point where I've done everything else. There was nothing left. But whilst we don't understand that there is something that we should be seeking, because we're so distracted, and then we've got this delusion that's imposed on people, it's difficult, because you're trying to move so many layers away from people's eyes. It's not just the spiritual, it's everything in this world. It's not even looking through a glass darkly. They're looking through a glass darkly with their eyes shut and sunglasses on, because it's that layered. Once this had parted for me, and I understood the religious side of it very early on, because remember, Catholics, Protestants, no different. Methodists, nothing. It still didn't tell me anything. But the key to it was the Bible all along. And the Bible was what was kept from me. We got scriptures taught to us. We got a Bible. But what would make me pick a Bible up? You know, at the time when I got my kids' Bible, my mum said it were just stories. So even though I enjoyed the stories and some of it went in, I'd rather play on my Atari or on my BMX or on my motorbike or playing football. That all got put to one side because I didn't understand what that was. So when my dad was killed at 16, I made all these decisions that set me up to a point where everything's stolen from me, whilst learning about the law and how it's applied and what's the truth. And I watched people who knew I was saying the truth just do what they wanted. And then when you report stolen property to the people who helped them steal it, it's a bit of an head scratcher. But on that path, Alex, I've been inducted into Taoism. I've done the mediumship. I've done all that stuff. All the religions, none of it, including the standing at Aylesbury at the standing stones, watching the sun come up while some druids banging a drum. And I'm going, what the hell am I doing here? Because this isn't life-changing. And then all of a sudden, this book that I'd never read changes my life. And that is the thing that I put my everything into then, because that changed my life. None of that would I tried. And when you get to the point, Alex, where you're on your knees in a caravan, 18 pints in, and you still can't drink enough, and you're saying, I don't want to be here anymore. And then you see that, and it's just given to you, and it changes you, it stops you. It just,
yeah.
All I can say is it convicted me enough, no matter how painful it was, that had to stop. I had to change, because I understood what the beginning was all about, where this fall had happened, why we are in a position of we're knackered. We need somebody to help us, but we have to know that we're sick before we ask for any help. And the problem is, when the society's sick is normal.
Yeah.
Nobody knows the sick.
Well, there's some technical stuff that I'm not going to get into about the Enlightenment, about the way theology can be done, things that happened at the time of the Enlightenment, the influence of philosophy on theology. But there was a massive point of departure at the Enlightenment. And one of the impacts on theology is there were two distinct approaches that are still with us today. They're both valid. There was an emergence of this focus on humanity and its potential in the Enlightenment, if it could become freed from some of the worst aspects of what had been religious tyranny in history. And it focused on humanity, human beings, the impact of beliefs on human beings. So you had this idea of, particularly on the doctrine of Christ, ideas of Christology from above, in other words, the heavenward, revelatory parts of it, and from below, the human. The elements of Jesus that were like Job in the Old Testament, the suffering, the things that we could identify with. So you had these theologies from above and from below started to compete with each other. And when you look at modern society, the problems of, since the Enlightenment, there's been many advances that are positive, but many degradations. And so we're in a lot of degeneracy that's been a spin-off of this. So it's, again, there's good and bad, but the bad in many ways now seems to be outweighing the good. And it's because we're operators in that, because a lot of these ideas and trends and movements got colonized. So, the debt-based economy. But one of the phrases I think that sums it all up, and why we have to look at theology and Christology from below, from the point of view of the human condition, because it's so confusing, not just the revelatory perspective, because that's Bible up there. We're not up there, we're down here. So we're operating down here. And when we look at the corruptions, do you remember that? There've been a few, you see them now in supermarkets with buy one, get one free, but it used to be buy now, pay later. That's what it always used to be. And that was sold as a positive. So if you think about that as a marketing slogan when they first started it, hey, you can buy now and pay later, which in many cases with people massively in debt becomes buy now, never bother having to pay. You can write it off as bankruptcy. So buy now, don't pay at all. Then we have people just milking the credit card, and they've been co-opted into an evil system because they benefit from it. So they've signed up, complain about debt, but then we'll try and get it written off. And then they'll say, well, it's not me, it's the system. But the whole point is, it sounds like, from the advertising slogan designer's point of view, buy now, pay later. Isn't that good? But the satanic voice, the satanic overlays, buy now, pay later. So it's the satanic underlying voice through the marketers, the glove puppets, making it sound like it's a good thing when really the sting is in the tail of the scorpion. And that's it. Buy now, pay later. Most people want to be able to acquire now. It's the same with cosmic orders. Well, what do I want now? Well, I want to manifest this thing. Well, it's a good thing for me. What about any unintended or negative consequences? Don't care about them. Me. Buy now, acquire now, think about it later. So this infection is all the way through the culture. And it affects and infects Christians, doctrines, everything on every level, because this culture is just seeped through all the pores of all of us. So, you know, we're talking really the slogan when you talk about doing theology and Christology from below, it's right. So have you lot, everyone who's watching, everybody out in the world, you know, who's campaigning against the corruption, have you still bought in to buy now, pay later? Are you still acquiring now and not thinking about the future? Have you cordoned all that off and said, oh, spirituality doesn't matter to me because I'm getting a new car next week? Or Ruben Amorim is the new manager at Manchester United. So all the media focus and suddenly everyone's watching it. It's entertainment. So we've all been hypnotized and we're all making those choices, but we might not realize that we've said, yeah, I'm buying now. I don't care about paying later.
It's very strange because you ask some questions there that, you know, I always have to add that bit where if we've been taught to act a certain way that is normal and that is not conducive to a good lifestyle, why would you not want to correct that? And the problem that you've got is you've got people who are saying they've got, they've gone off on research on doing this, and this. But they still got, no, you still got to pay your bills. It's not understanding the fundamentals of how they're funding everything that is being turned against us. And the fact that we keep, like the farmers, bless them, they registered for that protest. You know, it's a compliance. You're agreeing that you stick to their rules while you stamp your feet and say, we don't like this. But what happens when that farmer who did that, when the bailiffs turn up at his house? You know, I remember an old story back in the 90s. Albert, I want to say Drysdale, but I'm not sure what his last name is, but he was a farmer who built his own bungalow, right? And because he built it on his own property and it wasn't, you know, over a certain night, it's about planning permission and stuff. So he dug this hole and he built the bungalow in it, so you could only see the rooftop. And they went on for months. He was attending court with bundles and saying, look, I built it with my own hands, brick by brick. I will take it down brick by brick. If you can show me in the law where I have to do what you're saying. And they couldn't. And in the end, they turned up with a bulldozer because he wouldn't open his gate. So they were going to go through the hedges and bulldoze his house. And the not Granada TV, Swindon Television was down there filming this. And he just got this glazed look over his face because he got sick of arguing with them at the gate. And he just pulled this gun out, shot the councilman, shot at the police. I think a copper got hit in his elbow, or the reporter got hit in his elbow, but I think a policeman got shot as well. But there was, you know, he was at the end of his tether. That's what he'd been driven to. And that was back in the 90s. Now, if that gyro that I remember signing and putting money to it, Alex, and going into the electric board and handing it over, if I knew I was paying twice there, I wouldn't have done that. But my mum would have shouted at me for not doing it because everybody does that. So it's no good just saying, oh, Keir Starmer, blah, blah, blah. That's not breaking anything. You just, you know, it's like wafting in smoke and then all of a sudden a different figure appears in front of you. You know, it's an illusion of change that we aren't having. So when we protest, it's a legal acceptance. So nothing changes. It's just like Keir Starmer's there now. It's like the old London Palladiums, you know, with the impressionists who turn round and bend over into a box and ruffle their hair and then come back as a different man. That's exactly what we're seeing. And we're arguing with the likes of Keir Starmer when we know that this is being operated from such a level that it's pointless arguing with what Keir Starmer is. It's the same now with the utility companies. All this has changed. It's government policy for you to have a smart meter. It's not the policy of the company. So when we're arguing with these companies now, we'll go to court with these companies and we're lost because it's public policy. You've got to take your government to court. How's that going to work, Alex? We've got to start seeing how big this picture is and how far down the line that they've got us. You mentioned earlier about the immigration coming in. The population, people are suddenly just, dropping down dead. Many are choosing to jump or fall onto train lines and fall off bridges onto motorways. This is daily occurrences. People are checking out. There's something not right.
Well, yeah, that could be one of your understatements for tonight, Paul. There's something not right.
There's something not right, mate.
Yeah.
And well, that's the problem. You've got everybody who knows that, but I'm a celebrity's on. Football's just finished, so we're not bad yet. It's when that changes, that's when we're going to see what's left that we can do. That's why it's important now not to just understand what's going on in this world, but understand what's going on for eternity here. This has always been the same battle, and it's a battle for souls. Where are you at? Do you know if you're paying bills when you shouldn't be? What else have you been taught that you don't know about? What have you settled for with the information that you've taken in? Because what was it you come up with? Crap in, crap out. That's the basic
garbage
model.
In, garbage out. Yeah, Gigo.
So that's what we've got. We've got generations of that. At some point, we've lost capacity. We think we're so intellectual because we can, regurgitate things and go on the internet and find all this information out. But it's actually stopped us from learning. We're not critically thinking. People will accept Wikipedia as gospel almost. There's interesting things going on that we're not asking questions of. We've got the Chinese government writing a new Bible that, basically seems to substitute Jesus for the Chinese party. So that's their Bible. We've got now the US Bible. What's that? I've not had the chance to peruse a version of that. Is this like the NIV on acid and steroids? Who knows what this Bible is, but could the very elect be fooled? Are we getting to those times, Alex? Do we see things that are indicating that, I saw an interesting debate going on about the amount of people in Iran who are turning to Christianity. We don't hear about that on the mainstream, but these are ex-Muslims and imams that are talking about this. But what Christianity are they joining? You mentioned earlier that shouldn't we all be on the same page? 700 religions that all believe in Jesus and they don't believe the same thing. Well, why don't we just listen? Why don't we just read what he said and do what he said? And if we should all be singing off the same hymn sheet by that point.
Yeah, well, the problem here is
common sense.
Truth can be like a painting. And if
you've got a picture of Bob Ross now. Go.
Yeah, if you've got paintings on the wall and they're just truths, you're a spectator on a painting. The painting lies outside of you. Maybe it portrays a scene. It's a scene is a two-dimensional cross-section of a reality. We're called to live in a reality. That's why Jesus didn't just say I'm the truth. He said I'm the way and the life. There's a total reality. Now, for me, one of the things I think hasn't happened and that the church has been very poor at down the centuries, even when the advent came of modern psychology in the 19th century, didn't take seriously enough the impact on psychology and understanding of psychology on spirituality. So we still got some real divides there in our understanding. So people coming from a spiritual position often don't have much psychological nuance to that understanding of spirituality. And those people who now believe psychology is king will just relegate spirituality and says it has no value outside of psychology. and the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So, for example, I think what we've really realized, if we've embraced the insights of psychology, we understand pain, not just from a religious suffering perspective, but we understand it from a psychological perspective. You look at a wounded bear, it'll lash out. And that's a classic metaphor in people's eye, or don't corner a rat. So we've got these primitive instincts around pain, fear, and reactivity. And these things are deeply entrenched in people. And when people act out, they act out of pain, it's because their psychology is unhealed. Now, they might think they go to a therapist to get their psychology healed. And there may be some benefit in that. They should attend to that. But there is more to it than that as well. Because if it only ends there, there's no constructive or productive vision. It's just getting rid of the negatives. It's just getting rid of the pain. What is after the pain? The pain is just an incentive to notice, like a toothache. There's something wrong. But most people don't deal with the pain. Now, a lot of that for people is inner child pain, unaddressed childhood trauma, which went under the surface, and it's acting from behind the scenes. That childhood trauma is like the person in the JCB. It's operating the person, and the adult isn't getting a look in, and they're still living in childlike ways, even though they're in an adult body. And it's pain that's making them hide and run away from themselves. They abandon themselves, they abandon God, they abandon their families, they turn to whatever decoying, whatever drug it is or distraction. And then we get an absolute mess because...
Didn't we say, sorry for interjecting, but didn't we say that that's when the adult stepped in and that little kid is that injured, goes away and hides, and some form of older adult steps in, what they think is an adult.
Yeah.
And that grows. And then because of that child, there's a bigger gap and something acts up in them. And it causes them to become violent and become angry.
Exactly. So the psychological...
To go back to and find that child, that's why people find out, you go through these different things. You talked about New Age and all the gong bashes. People go through all that. And the amount of people, you've seen some of the testimonies that I've been sent, who've been 8 years doing Reiki, and all of a sudden, they just get it. They just understand it. They've sent me videos today of the baptism. They've been baptized today, but I've not been able to open it on this laptop. I'm looking forward to having a look at that, because the people are understanding that there's something unique, there's something different about this. So if you don't apply yourself into that, how can you ever dismiss it? It's like the old adage, isn't it? Where were you? What were you doing, Grandad, when this war happened? I was writing witty memes and all that. You've got to start understanding this on a level that is just not, well, I'll have a look at it, when I've got a bit of time. Well, we might not have that time. And I'm only saying that because of how focused I've had to be on it. It's a lot different people who've got a lot of other stuff going on. I get it.
Well, imagine, like, say you've been church services before or midweek groups where somebody will pray something like, they'll be in public prayer and you'll start off with, "Dear loving Heavenly Father." Now imagine somebody there who's not a Christian, but they go into that meeting and they listen to this, and their father was a wife-beating, marauding, not very nice individual who's never processed that, is in the deep pain of that, and is still fighting ancient father battles. And here's "Dear loving Heavenly Father." They have no template of earthly loving father who they've encountered. They may not even know their father. So how can so we face serious problems with that. Now, just on the inner child level, if you've not dealt with your inner child pain, and even if you're sincerely praying, "Dear loving Heavenly Father," Jesus called God the Father Abba, which means daddy. If you've got a cynical view, you are not going to come to God in a personal relationship through Christ and say, "Daddy." You'll probably feel like a fool. You'll probably feel like you're being really childish. But this is where we have to connect that then, because when the inner child wound is healed, you can view God in that way. It is like daddy. And that takes us right back to Eden before the fall. Because when we were so childlike, so innocent, so uncorrupted, but there's no way back to Eden.
You have to go back to being broken. You've got to be broken again.
And there's no way to get there because of the flaming cherubim. After we fall, we are in that condemned, cynical adult state, separated because of our pain and that sin from that inner child because of these wounds. And therefore, we can't say daddy, and we can't manufacture it because it doesn't feel real. So until it feels real, until you can trust and you've got that level of relation, and Jesus called God the Father daddy. I mean, that's radical. He also welcomed little children when everybody else rejected him. He turned everything upside down and he said, you won't get into the kingdom of heaven unless you come like this. He said that to his disciples as well. But you can't get back there. You can't trek your way back. You can't get back into your mother's womb like he said to Nicodemus. There's no human way of getting back there. So if we've got to heal the pain, we talk about being born again because of Nicodemus, but what does that mean? We've got to gain access. In practical terms, the fruit of that is we've got to be able to get access to healing our pain, all our wounds that have been with us from the beginning, and be able to get to a point where we can say daddy. And no person who's failed to meet with Christ will be able to say that.
Come as little children, meaning everything that you've been taught, unlearn, start again. And that was everything. That was everything I'd learned in this world was either false or littered with falsehood. So you have truth. You have truth and falsehood together. You've got to discern that. Well, if everybody believes a truth and a falsehood, that customers pay for the gas. Oh right, what am I? Oh yeah, I'm a customer. Oh, am I? Who says? Well, that's just life. Oh, okay. So what do? You work hard, you pay your bills. Oh, right. Everybody does that. Yeah, that's life. Oh, okay. I don't need to think about that then. So nobody thinks about it. Nobody thinks about how much tax has been taken. They just concentrate on what they've got to spend. And from what they've got in their account, they've got to deduct gas, water, electric, council tax, rent, That's what I've got left. That's what I can spend. So that's all we're programmed to do. What we've got left, with as much work as we can, that type of thing. But now, Alex, it doesn't matter how hard you work. You're not going to be able to sustain it. It's all being crushed around you.
It's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of stuff, Paul, that's forcing us to come to God, whether you pray or reach out, whatever. God as a concept. God as a concept, because life is, because of the increasing lawlessness, the love of most people will grow cold. They'll become bogged down, weighted down with all these practical matters of life, like the parable of the sower. It'll choke off anything pure and innocent because the weights and troubles of this world, the oppressions, everything. Then we get into our silos and we tell each other our true stories about how bad it is, and we all sink into cynicism. Even if we're correct, even if we've got the truth, we can sink into cynicism. That's the great ruse. So the very fact that we're having to live only at that level of facing inflation, struggling to make ends meet, whether you talk about bills in the classic sense or not, just the whole of economic life, the whole of modern life, it forces us into that more cynical, worn down adult that is moving further and further away from the playful, innocent inner child that we should never lose contact with. And that's what the gospel brings back to us. That's what it, and there's no other religion. I'm telling you now, there's no other religion, regardless of what you think about the merits and the philosophies about how they conceive God. There's no other religion that says you can say to God, Daddy.
No.
Daddy.
But this is where it sparks a debate with Muslims who say that Jesus was Muslim and all the prophets were Muslim. They all speak to Father, and Allah cannot be Father in any sense. So it's complete. It's a complete contradiction, and that's why again that scripture's unique. That one man, that one God said, I'm the way, the truth, the life. Nobody gets there but by me. The Pope says, no, that's wrong. Any religion can take you to God. So that's where we're at, Alex. How much more apostate do you want?
Yeah, well, they're all false prophets. This
exactly.
False prophet.
Exactly. And when you see these
they come to you as sheep, but as innocent sheep, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves, seeking to tear down and destroy. And we know that's what the enemy of God is all about, destroying. But Jesus turned everything upside down. He turned upside down the expectations of everyone. Came into Jerusalem on a donkey. I'm not a conquering Messiah. Turned the expectations even of the disciples on its head by dignifying women in a way the culture never had, and taking little children, putting them on his knee, and saying, these are what I'm looking for. Now, cynics will say, yeah, of course, you're supposed to remain like little children, innocent. We're not supposed to stay as children. We're supposed to have our inner child connection with God restored, but benefit from the adult. It's like you said at your Monopoly piece. We should be able to walk across two kingdoms, have the benefit of both kingdoms. The one where we mature and can act in that world, right, with our Monopoly piece, without becoming cynical, but also have that inner child thing where we have the innocence, the spiritual connection to God and each other.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what's missing now. You've got this world, and you've got the nuts and bolts of this world, and the system that would work if we acted correctly. Yeah. But when we learned how to act correctly with that, I just knew what to do with that instrument, and I watched them not want to touch it. Now, again, 10 years ago, if people had been wanting to fix the problem now, then we'd have changed everything, because it was brand new. Nobody was going into the courts with an instrument that was a remedy. You know, not even for a courtroom to tell you that was remedy. So that just flips it. That literally flipped the tables in this world for me, because I realized that everything had been made into commerce. God's temple, every temple, was made into a monopoly piece in a different world. Yeah, and that was the matrix. That was whatever. The problem, what we're going to be taught, is that to be pulled out of this matrix, that's going to be the naughty one. That's going to be the naughty God. You know, it's how Marvel have switched all the, you know, the reset of Thanos is Jesus coming back, and you've got all the hybrids fighting against that. It's the age-old thing. There's nothing new.
Well, we can't stop all the speculations. We don't have honest journalism. We see that Trump, Musk, his team, any influences on Farage should certainly seem better than Tutia Kia and Kamala Harris. That seems obvious on one immediate level.
That's what I'm saying. It's so obvious that they can't lose, can they, really?
But what we've also got from the perspective we've just been outlining from a Christian point of view, and God as Daddy, and this whole idea and a unique spirituality and a unique faith, is we have a different lens as well. So we can sit with what's going on and just be vigilant and understand that there can be a lot more going on beneath the surface in the cosmic level of battle, in the spiritual places of warfare. But keep our powder dry. Whereas when people don't have that, there's no anchor. They're going to get tossed around by every type of deception. It's very, very difficult to maintain your grounding. If Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, it's a three-dimensional model of living that's fulfilled, whole, as balanced as it can be. Not just going down a truth rabbit hole, because there's many different truths as people making truth claims. So, that was the same thing. Pontius Pilate said to Jesus, "What is truth?" Jesus answered him with silence. Because there's something where we have to perceive the truth. It isn't something put up on a billboard, because someone could have commissioned the billboard. Somebody corrupted the billboard. Someone could have put a false cover over the top of the billboard. And it's when you pull it off, you see the truth behind it. So we can't trust it at that level. We never can. We've got to have a deeper level of discernment and eyes that see beyond. And how are we going to see properly? The Jews couldn't recognize Jesus because they were expecting a warlike Messiah. They were looking in the wrong direction. They were looking for a rescuer, a deliverer, whether it's a Trump or a Farage or someone coming in a white Charger. There's something in our psychology that makes us susceptible to want heroes. And the only answer to that is for us to step up and become the heroes in our own lives. But heroes who are adult but haven't lost touch with what it is to remember what it was when you were a kid. And if we don't get that balance and we live out of pain, we'll get deluded, we'll get deceived, because there's just too much information out there. And we don't have the power as human beings, and we don't have good journalists. We are going to get led astray, and we need something, an anchor. Jesus described his words as a rock. Anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like one who built his house upon a rock, rather than the one who doesn't do this, and he's like one who built his house upon a sand. When the testing times come, We know which one stands and which one falls. Most people don't have that rock. They're blown around by every kind of whim, every change of direction of the wind. They're changing the belief system every 2 minutes. So where's the solidity? Where's the consistency? And that's another aspect of having faith that has practical consequences for how you live your life in the world today.
Yeah, sorry, I was just lost in some thoughts, and the way I see how it's the thing that's happened in America and how that's played out with the elections, and now we've got the Trump-elect coming in January, and I hear English people, British people, Welsh people all saying the same thing, that they think that that's a good thing. You know, Musk challenging Keir Starmer, it's as if there's something been started. You know, we indicated about Webby and him stepping down all of a sudden after, you know, it's as if there's some kind of exposition coming or expose or something like that, as if, you know, this could be like the peace and safety time. And then they start cleaning it.
As if Taylor could have had a point and yet still have been beneath a layer of the veil that doesn't see that spiritual thing behind that's operating the marionettes.
Exactly. There's that many layers. Don't peel those layers and see through that and go, ha, I'm finished. It's done. That's not your time to say it's finished, it's done. It's to move everything. Yeah. You know, keep knocking, because I think if anybody puts their faith in people for their life, then at some point all those people will let them down, no matter who it is. Under the right set of circumstances, you know, a man will become cannibalistic within 2 weeks under the right set of pressures. So it's not as easy to say that will never happen.
Paul, I will never consume you at a banquet.
Right? Yeah, don't.
I've been saved. I'm healed. I'm not in pain anymore. And even if I run out of food and I was up at your caravan, mate, I will not butcher you. And even if you passed away, I reckon your cat would eat you. She's brilliant, Monkey, but she would. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it, Paul. I'm civilized. I'm a born again Christian, so I won't do that now.
What would you do? Chase seagulls?
I don't know. What would you do? It's a good question, isn't it? But you've got to have the light-hearted side as well, though, because these topics are so serious. If you can't have a laugh as well, this is the big problem that people like me and thee have got, pal. You know, because we're embroiled in these things all the time and dealing with really big picture issues and how to translate them into actual live life, it's a heavy burden. And it can rob you of joy. It can rob you of joy.
It does, but it's not because you get obsessed with it. It's because it's ingrained into you. Because bearing in mind, 15 years ago, Alex, I just come out of a relationship that, you know, it wasn't a great relationship, and I'd come out of that and I was free. I had a good job, house, everything. You know, it was like I wouldn't have thought about any of this stuff. But then all of a sudden, some things happen, and then the picture becomes so big. And I said all along that I recognize patterns, and when patterns mesh with each other perfectly, apart from a few gaps, so you've got to like look a little bit harder at information. But you know, when you've got a 5,000 piece jigsaw, you don't need all the pieces to see how big the picture is.
Yeah,
you know, you can see the picture, you can see the basics. You know where the ship is, you know where the post office is, you know where the lamps are, because you've got them all in place, because you can see a picture. So all the information that I had, I could see bits. But then all of a sudden, when you go into the court system and you get involved with the banks and the councils that are all coming in and the utility companies, and they're all coming in together on the same ticket, and then you see the judges going, "Oh yeah, I can't see that," And they're all doing that together. All of a sudden, you see this system that's meant to be a justice system. Somebody said earlier that it's a criminal justice system, not a people justice system. So all of a sudden, you see this massive amount of fraud that is committed against you without you knowing and your full consent. That should make you feel, well, it made me feel stupid, because I felt that my mum and dad had taught me that, and my mum and dad had been fooled. So I saw my mum and dad work like dogs, Alex, 13 hours a day in their own business. My dad doing 6 nights a week, long distance lorry driving. Also, I could have everything that they never had, yet they didn't.
No, Paul, he was working like a dog, and it was a hard day's night.
But they shouldn't have worked that hard, Alex. That's my point.
No, but you know the Beatles.
I know what you're saying, mate. But I couldn't get over it. It changed everything. It was a game changer. So now, after being called a knobhead all these years, all of a sudden, everybody wants to do something about it. And now they're going reading. The problem that we have is they dug in for this. They bunkered in.
They're not reading, though, are they? They're signing petitions to get rid of Keir Starmer.
Signing petitions, but they are doing some reading. But and understand what I'm saying. You know how heavy it is. You've got to be able to join all those dots, and it means you've got to not just sit and read it. You've got to speak to other people who have sat and read it, and you do the to and fro thing, and you sort it out. That's why we always kept our circle small, because we had good minds who, when we come to a problem, we'd look at it from different angles and then come back together and throw our tuppence in. That's how we got to the point where we knew that this should work. This was remedy. Everybody else that we were coming into contact with was saying all these things that might have been true, but they don't apply to where we were stuck. We were stuck in the commercial court. So we wanted to act correctly with an instrument that I've been told I can, correctly act with. It was too simple. Now that instrument is not readily available. So people are going to have to be able to take them to court and sue them for that instrument. But you've got the problem is that, we've met people recently. They want to do stuff because they understand it, but the family aren't involved. The family is scared. They've got house to pay for. They've got bills to pay. All that's going to change. So it stops people doing anything. So we've got people who are now taking knowledge in, Alex, but then they're still not being able to do anything, whereas we had a bit of a foothold 10 years ago. Right now, they've bunkered in. They're ready for it. It's just people won't go for the remedy and then act on it. It's a very heavy thing to do. It's not something that people can just go, oh, I'm going to sign it and do that. All right. When they say, no, we're not accepting it, you've got to then tell them why they've got to accept it. Or you've got to tell them what they're treating you as. But there's no, without going and suing these people, we're not getting the access to be able to do that. As a defendant, you've got no rights at all. You mentioned earlier about how the court system always favours the female. And we know that it's because most, especially when it comes to family and divorces, the female, if they hate the fella, they're going to go for everything. And that means they can stretch things out. A mate of mine had £750,000 worth of stuff on paper, and he walked away with 54 grand because she hated him that much. She wouldn't turn up for hearings, all this kind of stuff, and the barristers were turning up and they still had to be paid. So the system just encouraged that. A bit of miscommunication, I got the wrong time or the wrong date. They play into all this because when they see equity, it's just theft. Yeah. And they have full control over everything that's registered in between that Mr. and Miss business. And we just get married because we love each other. That's what it's about, isn't it, Alex?
Well, that's what I got told. It doesn't seem to work out like that a lot of the time. I mean, for those people who it does, happy days. But the thing is, really, it's incredibly complex to be an integrated spiritual human being in the modern 21st century in Western society. Unbelievably difficult. You've got to have your stuff together. You've got to understand this stuff about pain. It's vital that you don't project your pain onto other people. It's vital that you don't look for rescuers from outside, even though there is one. But generally speaking, we want simple solutions where we don't take responsibility. But like Jesus said, take up your cross daily and follow me. It's going to be a painful path. It's not going to be easy. And as my friend Ozzy often speaks about, nothing in life that's worth anything comes easily. But we're in a society now where handouts to bribe people. How many people are uncorruptible? How many people stand in integrity? How many people won't take the easy path? That's the broad path that leads to destruction, and many of those who enter by it. The narrow path that leads to life. If you find
the harder you make life, the easier it is for those people to make those decisions. You put people into positions where they're backed into a corner, they'll either fight or comply. A lot of people comply until there's nobody else but them stuck in the corner, and it's their turn. We've seen them do this throughout history. Whenever we look at war and genocides, this is what happens. It's a different type of thing, though, and it's because it's happened in my lifetime, Alex, and it's such a difference. The last 4 years, it's completely changed the world. I could still see how people were still lost, because unless something really happens to them, I know so many people who are hard workers, grafters, both parents, and they manage everything, and they manage to get on holidays and stuff like that. That's what they're still doing. But when that's affected, that's when people will think, well, what can I do? Sometimes that might, in history, when we've got to that point, it's already too late. I've never seen anything so close to that point. I've been alive in 52 years anyway, man. Yep,
exactly. I'm just watching some comments in the chat while you were talking there. Looks like there's a little bit of controversy, which
there's always controversy, but somebody more credit has to get somebody on. I think it's anti-stupid, not vax. So if you want, we're coming up for the last half an hour, mate. So do you want to throw it open? Because I'm not sure. I think Anthony said earlier that he's just done a bill with a bank gyro, not a joint gyro, just a bank gyro. He says he knows how that works, so maybe he'll come on and tell us what he's done.
Yeah.
Apparently, there you go. Don't know what's going on here. Listen to anti-stupid, not vax. Get them on your show tonight. If you've got something to come and add, mate, you're always welcome. I'm not sure if Taylor's lurking.
I think the things get a bit tasty in the chat now.
I know you give him a bloody spanner and he's never here tighten any nuts.
I think he's been kidnapped by QAnon. They said your work here is done. Your work here is done. The White Hats have won.
Listen, maybe it's not Taylor now. Maybe it's somebody in a Taylor mask.
Well, it will be someone in a Taylor mask.
Maybe he's CIA. He could be CIA, couldn't he, Taylor? CIA are involved in everything. I think it was the Daily Mail posted an article today as if it was like a big shocker that FBI and CIA were working in media at the high levels. Who'd have thought?
I know. Indeed.
Well, nobody's jumping on at the minute, mate. So where would you want to take? What direction do you want to take this in? Because we can keep going on about how bad things are.
Well,
but
I don't think we are. I don't think we are just doing that.
I think we're showing a bit of hope, aren't we?
I think we're trying to frame it as broadly as possible.
Evening, chaps.
Very good, sir.
I've been watching you for a few weeks, but I've not been participating, as it were.
To be fair, we've not opened it up, have we? Really, Alex?
Well, I think we've just other things have happened. So I think Michael was the last.
You were in Bournemouth, Alex. My.
Oh yeah.
Well, I live in I'm originally from Leeds, but I live in Bournemouth now. So I missed you the other week.
Well, yeah, I was in West Parley.
Yeah, I wish I'd have known. It'd been interesting to catch up, to hear your opinions offline, sort of thing.
Yeah, a bit same, but yeah, interesting, and it's a different context. But yeah, that's interesting to know that. Well, you never know. Next time I'm down, I'll be down next year. So if we're all still
here. I mean, like I say, my family's in Leeds, and I've just got back tonight, funnily enough, and so. Did you say you were originally Pateley Bridge, or is that where you are now?
No, I had a holiday cottage for a while in Mythenroyd.
Right. Okay.
Which I sold a while back. Hey up.
There it is.
Is that you, Taylor, or is it Taylor in a mask?
It's you in a mask. I'm actually you.
Hey, I like a bit of surrealism.
Listen, don't get him started with his anime. That's probably happened in one of his cartoons.
Oh yeah, I talk about that all day, every day.
So, Paul, does that mean you're really Taylor in a Paul mask?
I hope not.
Hey, if he is, then he's not doing a good job of being me.
He doesn't have any of the goss on Trump. He doesn't have any of the Trump goss. He's not welling with Elon.
Have you seen any big changes happening, or have we got to wait till 2025, mate?
Well, some interesting headlines have come out. Nothing announcing things that are going to happen, but haven't actually physically happened yet. First off, there's Elon and Trump Jr. have announced that they're interested in buying MSNBC. Very interesting, in my opinion. Who knows if it'll actually happen? It could be a comm. Who knows? What's it called? We've been having some. I like to call them the black pill fanatics, going around and complaining about, oh, Trump picked this guy to be in his cabinet. Oh, we picked this guy. Oh, he's a Zionist. Oh, all that shit. I'm not gonna go over that here because I've been over it a million times. But yeah, it's all hot air in my opinion. It's just a bunch of hot air. As far as what's it called, the Ukraine thing. It looks like they were starting to head into that World War III scare event, and I'm excited. It's gonna be awesome because people are gonna be scared and they're gonna wake up and they're gonna be like, holy shit, things are really bad. Maybe we should actually realize that we've got a demented president, and that's the whole point. So they might try to pull a whole thing where the quote unquote Biden house tries to pull a emergency powers act to try to keep Trump out of office. It's obviously all scripted, but that's not the point. The point is for the public, the public face of it. So it could be very interesting what happens. The next couple months should leading into the inauguration in January 20. I forget the exact date. Should be pretty good. Hopefully we'll have a big, exciting event because that's exactly what we need in order to make all this worth it.
Taylor, just out of interest, do you think everything's gone as you thought it would go? Because to my mind, not everything's black and white. It's shades of grey, and I, you know, I don't get me wrong. I followed the Q post as well. I don't know what sort of channels you follow, but X22 report, SGT report. I follow guys like that. I don't necessarily take on board everything they say. I take everything with a pinch of salt and try and analyze things as the, you know, look at the big picture. But I mean, do you think everything's gone as you thought it would go, or not?
In the grander scheme, yes. With certain minor details, no, of course not, because the plan isn't stagnant. They do change a couple of things around if they see fit. And like, say for example, I was personally banking on them being an overt election steal reverse of 2020. They didn't decide to do that. That doesn't mean that the plan is still not going to the same destination. It's kind of like being a movie critic. You know where the movie is going to end. You know how it's going to end, but you just don't know the exact pinpoints and script that's going to take us there. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember, we don't have the script, so we don't know exactly what each of the points are going to be. But we know where the final destination is, and we know the general outline.
Is that you repeating what you've heard elsewhere? Because I've heard that same statement elsewhere. And X22 is people say the X22 report is a bit of hopium, and
I don't even know who that is.
Well, it's basically they've been the X22 report has been going on for longer than Q's been going on. Same as, do you not listen to SGT report? These are
I've listened to him
American.
I've listened to him a couple times. Not really my kind of. He's not. I don't really care for him. I like some of the things he says, but overall, he doesn't really. He's not really my kind of guy.
Just out of interest, who we all go to?
Have you ever heard of Mike King or Real News and History? And it's another one. What's the other guy's name? Dave and Mark with 17 News Channel and Patriot Underground.
Patriot Underground. I've listened to. I have listened to him because he gets Jim Willie on a lot. So I have listened to Patriot Underground. What do you think of Jim Willie's? Have you ever watched any Patriot Underground with Jim Willie?
I'm kind of not particularly. I don't watch all of Patriot Underground stuff. So I haven't really seen much of Jim Willie. If he has him on, then I'm sure that he's probably got some interesting information, but I can't say personally what that information is. So I'm not going to try to sit here and say that I have.
Well, he talks about Jim Willie talks about the child trafficking, and I mean, I know a lot of channels have talked about it.
Yeah, it's a very important topic. Here, I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna put a good channel in the private chat here to check out. And I'll even put it in the public chat for anyone who wants to go and click on it, because thanks to me having a spanner, I can actually post links. I don't know why YouTube doesn't let you post links if you don't have a fucking spanner. That's so stupid. But it's YouTube.
So you can't spam. So you can't spam people's chat rooms.
Well, I mean, you can still spam. You just can't spam links. Like, well, I don't see the difference.
Well, you can't put loads of porn links into people's chat rooms.
Oh my god. Porn links.
That's what happens.
Just out of interest, guys, what have you? Do you look where do you look for your information? Sort of where do you a sounding board? What sort of things do you look at?
Yeah, my news feed, Jason. I've made that many contacts with individuals who are, independent reporters, boots on the ground, all kinds of mainstream media and independent medias from different countries and different states, you know, because it's everywhere. So my news feed is just a constant thing. I get that much feed coming in. I don't really see many people seeing what I post because I'm so shadow banned. You know, I've just noticed one post. It's got loads of comments on it, but I've not been notified of any of them. So I don't know if anybody sees anything, but I certainly get a lot of really good feed from all kinds. You know, even from the BBC. I get it from everywhere. I remember back in 2014, Vanessa Beeley was in Syria speaking to Syrian army and people like that. And BBC are telling us it's a civil war that's going on over there. And they're telling us, no, it's insurgents, ISIS, funded and trained by the West, are trying to overthrow the government. And that was being reported boots on the ground. So back in 2014, I'm watching it on the news and I'm saying, that's not what's happening. And I have people disagreeing with me, you know, because it wasn't on the BBC and that was only 10 years ago. You know, at least you see things, whether it's contrived or not, you know, that'll become clear. But things are certainly moving. You know, there's an arrest warrant out for Netanyahu, even though it's not Netanyahu. Taylor, I know, we know it's not him.
Yeah. You can laugh if you want, but I can present some ample evidence and facts to prove to prove definitively that it's not him. So, you know, but laugh if you want. That's not.
No, it's difficult. The problem is it's difficult.
We're not laughing at you about it. We're laughing at the silliness of what it is. You've got to stop taking this personally. We've had this conversation so many times, Taylor.
No, I'm not saying you're laughing at me. I'm just saying that laughing in general.
We're telling you why we're laughing because we've said about the CIA masks. I was talking to my mate today. I said a TED talk where the CIA woman pulls a mask off in front of the audience, and they didn't notice she was wearing the mask. So we're laughing at the absurdity. We're in a Monty Python film, mate, at the minute.
Monty Python. That's a good way to put it. I like that.
That's what we're laughing at. So the fact is, Netanyahu was Netanyahu at some point, but now we don't know if it is Netanyahu. We don't know if
I would say the last time that Netanyahu was the real Netanyahu, I would say the last time was right after the 2020 election in November. Because when he went over to greet who he thought was Joe Biden winning the election, because he already knew what Trump was at that point. So I would say personally that's the last time we saw the real Netanyahu.
Well, the arrest warrant that's out against him, it just shows that Israel's now being turned on. Is Trump going to turn on? Because you said he's only pretended to be all Israeli. You know, he did. He has got his face on an Israeli coin and everything. They think a lot of him, you know.
That's good. I like that actually. When I saw that, I was like, well, that's actually pretty nice. That shows that the Israelis love him, and that's what we want. That's a good thing.
I mean, the Q did say we'll save Israel for last.
That's exactly right. Thank you. Good. Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still sat on the fence. I'm one of these people that believes judge people by their actions, not what they say. Now, there's there's still a lot of negative things about Trump, but I would also say you can't. In war, you can't come out and run over the. You can run over the line and get your head blown off, or you take a bit
like
more.
JFK?
Yeah, I mean, you put your head above the parapet and it's liable to get blown off. You've got to be devious in war. You can't just show your cards. And now don't get me wrong. I'm still sat on the fence. I could be wrong. Like what you say, Webby, about Trump. You don't totally trust him, and I'm still for me, the jury's out. I haven't made a decision either way. What looks good for Trump is a man, to a degree, he's a man of his word. And then now he's got this new 4 years. Let's see him in 4 years. Is he gonna is he going to do what he says, or is he, like you say, a Zionist puppet? And is he going to just do what his masters tell him to do? I really don't know. Honestly, I'm not.
I think he's more than that.
You think he's what? Sorry.
I think he's more than a Zionist puppet, mate. I think he's much more than a Zionist puppet.
You think he's like the Antichrist or something?
Yeah. Who else? Who else leaves Israel till the last and turns on him?
You're cutting out really bad, man. I can't hear you.
It's you, Alex, with us.
No, I'm good. I think it's you,
No, it's
Paul.
me.
Yeah, you're frozen, mate.
Yeah.
You're like a block of ice.
Can you upgrade from dial-up?
Oh,
It's
dial-up,
that
man. That's so
caravan. It's that
classic.
caravan. He's got no proper signal. I'm amazed he's here at all. It's almost proof. It's almost proof that Jesus exists that Paul ever gets on the podcast when he's up there. It's. I've been there so many times. He has to put his phone on top of this like shelf, close to the door. It's a nightmare. So he does really well, really. He must be having supernatural assistance. I'm surprised we've only lost him a couple of times.
Exactly.
So what's your as obviously Webby's not here. What are your thoughts, Alex, with regards to you're obviously you're both looking at it from a religious background. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm like Roman Catholic, but I've always taken it. For me, when someone tells you that you got to go to a place of worship one day a week, it never resonated with me. So I've sort of probably lost touch with religion from that point of view. Don't get me wrong, I always found value in the, I don't know whether they call it the parables or the Psalms, or like the for example, the prodigal son, the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. I always found value in that, but it's probably been corrupted by the Catholic Church. You know, this go to church once a week on a Sunday. It's just, to me, that never resonated. So that's probably why I lost touch with religion, because it didn't ring true with me. So certain things did, like I said, the parables, and so yeah, for me, I took from religion what I thought was value, and the other things I sort of tossed aside. But
attending church once a week, you don't even need a religious perspective on the question of once a week. It's a social convention, and it's not explicitly biblical. It's just a useful thing for people, because obviously weekends, for most people who don't work shifts and weekends, Saturday, Sunday, give part of one of the days which has been assigned as Sunday as kind of obviously there's the Sabbath aspect. Jews on Saturday, most Christians have moved to Sunday, so they choose that day, and they used to be the Sunday trading laws. But you can go to somebody, Emil Durkheim, who was obviously French anthropologist, studied primitive societies, particularly Aboriginal totemism, and he talked about the importance of the ability of human beings to come together to revivify social sentiments. So he talked about people coming together, like, for example, if everyone was just individuated and never met, which has got nothing to do with religion, it's got everything to do with social cohesion. He talked about the flag. You might talk about a football shirt following a football team. There's something that's required to unify human consciousness. There has to be a flag around which they organize. It's nationalism. There's got to be a cause. There's got to be a God. There's got to be an ancestor. And so the fact that it's one day a week, it's not specifically a religious institution. It seems to simply be a shorthand for meeting every day. It seems to be a cultural convention that enables people, like Durkheim said, to come together and rally around something to bring a degree of unity. So there's many other models that were possible. It just so happens that in the West, that particular take on what Durkheim observed is what we see in typical Western societies. Many churches have midweek meetings, other things, annual church holidays. They build a shared life together. They'll have uniform groups. So there's a kind of a social and cultural life around the church. I'm not saying, obviously, look, many churches have Cubs and Scouts, and Scouts are connected to Freemasonry, but basically, most churches don't pick up on that. They just see it as a uniformed organisation that brings discipline, training to the kids, gives them a vehicle in which to meet again and organise. So social life does require vehicles to organise, and I think it's just a case of what vehicle you choose. There's no intrinsic worth in setting aside one specific day and having a specific format of church service on that day with so many hymns, a speaker, this, that, and the other. It's just a convention we happen to have chosen over here. And Jesus talks about that in John 4. He said, a day is coming when now is the Samaritan woman, when the true worshippers will worship God in spirit and in truth, not in any building. There won't be but we still need to meet. So obviously it's neither one nor the other. It's a combination.
That's very well said. Oh man, and
if I can explain what I was trying to before I got booted again. Alex, who else leaves Israel till the last and then turns on them?
Well, as we know, it's the one who halfway through the arrangement breaks that covenant.
Yeah. And as we so Trump, QAnon said Israel will be the last to know, then they'll turn on Israel. So again, looking at a bigger picture, we've got to say there's two lines of information there. We've got to, as Jason said, see what fruits birth from this now, because we're getting to the crux of it. You know, they certainly seem to be doing something to the swamp. I think they're adding to it as well as draining it. They're doing it over here because, like I said, this week alone, the amount of people who've wanted Starmer out and Farage in, and I've had I have a source that I've known a while, and they actually, that source believes that Trump and Farage, and their words were our boys. So, from chaos comes some kind of peace and safety, I suppose. I think we're going to see the fruits.
You got Dorian here saying his last quote on the chat. Well, actually, it's now been replaced, but Israel never really existed in the first place. Now, if by that, what you mean, Dorian, is that in 1948, an artificially imposed state of Israel as a nation state was imposed artificially on that region, yes. But the point is that geopolitical structure still reflected ancient Jerusalem. There was ancient Israel and Judah. Those nations have been there in that land, making the claim to that land thousands of years before you had the Palestinian incursion. Now, the bottom line is, I don't take a particular view about the right and wrongs in this. There's a vision within Israel about a return, quite apart from the nation state of Israel and its political operations and its acts of atrocities like any other nation state. But the actual people, the promise of God that came to the Jewish people is something that was promised to them, that there's been a Jewish diaspora, they've been all over the place, they would come back unified to their land. So that they then saw 1948 as the fulfillment of that. Even if we have a different take that it's an artificial construct, it is connected to a continuity of historical Jewish consciousness. So the question then is, within that framework, which is much, much older, like multiple thousands of years, prophetically speaking, the idea is that at the end, God ties up the loose ends with the ones who rejected Jesus as Messiah. Because unlike Muslims, who just basically piggybacked on the back of the Judeo-Christian tradition and then tried to co-opt it and change it to fit, to say Jesus is a Muslim and fit it all in, there was a covenant, and Jesus displaced, maybe he was the fulfillment of Israel, but they still were, of the promise. But you can't have a racial entry point, but he'll come back to that nation and redeem it. So that's the biblical position, that at the end, many of the Jews will turn and recognize Jesus as Messiah, which is the thing that they didn't do, a lot of them, from the beginning.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the state though, which I
Yeah.
get. You know, I get. That's why when you've got Christians saying that Israel is God's chosen people, you know, there's a difference. It's not the land. It's not the land anymore. It's going to be new that. But
It's
I
not.
can
It's
see.
not obviously. It's not the chosen people, the state of Israel, but the way it acts to secure a national border. Like, for example, when the destruction of the temple, the Babylonian exile, they came back, and Ezra and Nehemiah were strongly linked with the rebuilding of the temple. And in Nehemiah, they'd rebuilt the city, but the city walls were still broken down, which meant they were susceptible to attacks from enemies. And Nehemiah was involved in the rebuilding of the walls around the city. So there was a lot of fervent nationalism at the time, Jewish nationalism. Well, that Jewish national identity was important. You know, the destruction of the second temple, the Pharisees had to change their approach to Christians and other sects because they concluded that all these diverse messianic sects were watering down the core of Judaism. And that was what was leading to problems with the Romans, because originally the Jews had protection for the Romans. They were able to give sacrifice on behalf of the emperor because the Romans had instated a policy that you had to sacrifice to the emperor as if he were God. The Jews obviously were not comfortable with that. They secured special rights that they could give an offering to their God on behalf of the emperor. So they were given protections. But because there were so many sects, it started to create various problems. And the Pharisees, after the destruction of the temple in AD 70, decided that they had to weed out the messianic types, the Nazarenes, and they created something called the Birkath Harmonim, that when you went into the synagogue, you had to pronounce a curse on all heretics. And that included Christians who believed Jesus was Messiah. Because by doing that, then, the Christians were outed. They could no longer go to the synagogues because all early Christians were also Jews. They just happened to believe Jesus was Messiah. The Jews who didn't believe Jesus was Messiah were not very happy about this, including the Pharisees. So they developed this curse to force the Christians to become a different sociological grouping. When that happened, they started being persecuted because they lost the protections of that the Jews had with the Romans, started being thrown to the lions, started being persecuted. So all this stuff was really significant, and it was an early form of identity politics.
And it's still playing out to this day.
Yeah.
Still playing out. So, but we see this point narrowing now. I mean, you know, like Taylor said, Israel's going to be a prominent part in this, and we're all looking that way now. It's just going to be interesting to see what fruit is bearing and how that fruit tastes. I suppose we're all going to taste different fruits. Last 5 minutes, lads. Jason, you come on first. Have you got anything to say on your way? You know, it's nice for you to come on after all this time and, you know, participate in this. And, you know, I know we take up some of your time when you come and do this. So, you know, we appreciate it because there's not a lot of people that want to come on. You know, we invite people on all the time, and some come, some don't. So it's nice to see that you're willing to come.
No, I enjoy the discourse. To be honest, I enjoy your feedback and your take on things, because I've not settled on one side or other. I do love Taylor's optimism, but because I'm forever saying this, we're living in such a time of deception. It's like, are we all being deceived, or even from I don't want to be sort of belittle religion, but what I mean, what would you guys do tomorrow if you found out that everything you believed in was a lie? You know, it's like, what do you do then? I know, because you no, but I mean, no, but I mean, you sort of like 180. Say if you went 180, so now you're convinced that you've convinced with religion, which I don't, I'm not questioning either way. But if you found out tomorrow That's why I talk about Cliff High. He could be way off. He could be, he could be totally wrong. But if he's right, and what you're saying is what he's saying is right. Your version is 180. This, because I mean, what the elevator pitch of what he's saying is we've been fooled by like space aliens to believe in religion. They've just set it up for us foolish apes, as it were, to believe a certain narrative. Now, God, is that the biggest? Is that the biggest lie? Have we been duped? We all get duped, but is that the biggest? Have we been duped, big style, with that?
Well, he's one man.
The biggest lie for me, Jason, was the Bible was the truth, because every time I brought the Bible, and this is nothing to do with religion, I could not be further from a religious or a religion ever, and I just knew they weren't for me. But I'd never read that book that was meant to be a living word, and I didn't understand what that meant until I actually read it. The Cliff Eye stuff is no different to Enlil and Enki coming and making us mine for gold and all that stuff. All these other stories that are all copies of the same Bible that I'd never read. That Bible changed me, Jason. That's what changed me. It wasn't me reading a book and just believing it. I know people that believe Harry Potter's real. I know people that go to Hogwarts and believe that it's all been real. They feel it. But that's not true. And I've never had an experience from anywhere else other than that. And I went, as soon as I asked people questions, because they'd say, oh, religion's this, religion's that, the Bible's been corrupted. Well, have you done any research? Have you picked this Bible up and gone to a lexicon and seen the Hebrew to this Greek to the English, and to see the different words and to have an understanding of this? Once I did that, it changed everything. Whereas when I went to Cliff Eye, I got 31 minutes in and went, this is nothing new. It's all the same stuff that never bothered me, never touched me, always found it interesting, just like Nassim Harriman stuff about all the physics of the world and how we interact with the physics. It was all interesting to me, but nothing changed my life until I read that Bible. And it was a different aspect. And once I just knew that let the word tell you, people get stuck on like I love the old English. So the KJV, me, thee, thy, thous, I love that because I have an understanding of it, and it's like poetry to me. Now that is a really one of the best versions in English that we've got. The Geneva Bible's there as well, but all the other Bibles have had manipulations done, verses taken out. Thousands of words have been taken out of the NIV compared to the KJV. And it changes contexts a bit. So all of a sudden, I needed to know the best that I could get, not what somebody was going to tell me. And I could only do that with using a lexicon, so I could see what the English, what the Greek and the Hebrew all came together meaning. And you could get an understanding. And if you've got vocabulary, you can it's plain to see. You just use your common sense with it. It's nothing special. It's just using common sense, but it's having that time, all that dedication. And you can fall asleep reading the Bible like that, mate. If you can't sleep, open a Bible. You'll be gone in 5 or 10 minutes because you're not meant to be able to get to it.
What I'd add, I've got a comment there by, I think it's Jimmy Hagan. It's like calligraphy. It's a good example of the same thing, right? So Jimmy here is making his claim. The Jews have no national identity. They were wanderers, almost itinerants. And then he backs it up by saying, this is stated by many respected rabbis. It's always the same. We've got to say that to support the claim. That, and because rabbis are Jewish. So we go, well, they must be right then, because they're Jewish rabbis. Well, no. The thing is, if you're a Jewish rabbi, you wouldn't want your religion to be associated with pure nationalism. So the Jewish rabbi has to say, no, it was God's covenant with, first of all, Noah, and then with Abraham, and then with Moses, there's continued, and then with David, down the nation, all the way down through the history of the nation. And therefore, it's not nationalism is then a corruption. But the bottom line is, we don't live in a vacuum. And by the time of John the Baptist, he was saying to the Pharisees and Sadducees, the chief proponents of the teachings, you brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Do not presume to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. For I tell you, at these very stones, God is able to raise up children to Abraham. In other words, they were just saying, yeah, well, God could make his children out of these stones. Keep making claims back to Abraham because he's the patriarch. These were nationalistic Jews who really hated the Romans. The Sadducees made more concessions with them because they were political operators and wanted to maintain stability and temple power. But the reality is, people make these shorthand statements. Rabbis have claimed that Jews have no national identity. Utter garbage. Utter garbage. And they've always had a prominent national identity connected to the religious identity. And at the destruction of the temple, the exile of Babylon, Ezra and Nehemiah, they went through all kinds of ethnic cleansing, purity stuff because of the lineage, because foreign races had intermingled with them. So they had a strongly nationalistic identity. So I don't know what these rabbis, what they were smoking, but, it's powerful stuff.
Brilliant. Anyway, thanks for coming on again, Jason. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you again next week, pal.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers, pleasure.
Thank you, Jason.
Take care, mate. God bless.
Cheers, you
mate.
too. Bye.
Cheers.
Taylor, ask you to sir.
Say again?
Ask you to sir.
He's speaking in dialect. He's saying, he said, have you got anything to say? Ask Geet out. Have you got anything to say?
Okay. Yes. Go check out my channel. I've got a lot of really good stuff on there that I've been uploading and from people, whether it be podcasts or documentaries. I've been getting quite a few views on one called Pedo Wars, and I even got some comments. So I've been doing pretty decently on that. I would recommend just go check out my channel. I'll link it in the chat, and I think you'll like a lot of the stuff that I've been putting on there. And
I
also,
have seen a couple of them because it's coming up on my news feed. So some of the stuff you're posting has been coming up on my YouTube.
Oh, nice. Have you been seeing any of it? I can't hear you. Oh my God, you're frozen again, man. The YouTube gods have taken you from us once again, man.
Been taken out by Q.
Taken out by the Mossad, man. The Mossad has wringed its ugly hand again.
So do you believe that Q is Mossad then, Taylor?
No. No, hell no. That is dumb. That is dumb.
That was one of the comments in the chat.
No, that's just dumb. That's just so dumb. And I don't know, like, yeah, I saw that comment. I'm not gonna attack anybody because that's just childish, but I'm just gonna say, man, I'm gonna be blunt, that was very dumb. That was a very dumb comment. And like I could sit here all day and say that Q is against Mossad and has actually crippled the Mossad, but I don't really think that's going to do any good in this limited space. So all I can say is just go check out some of the stuff I've uploaded on my channel, and you can see that Q and Trump, not by their words but by their actions, have crippled the shitty little state and the New World Order and the globalists. Talk is cheap. Actions are what matter. And, we got the receipts to show the actions, as they say.
Well, we'll see what happens within the next week, and you can come back on and tell us next week where the state of play is then, Paul.
Right. And also, before I go, here's another channel for you to check out on Rumble. It's Definitely go check out this guy's content. He's very, very, very good. This is where I get a lot of my information from. He has his own website, and I'm subscribed to it. I even donate a little bit of money to him because he's so good. Oh man. And you know, if I say that, you know that it must be true, because you know how I despise people that do that kind of thing. So if I'm the one doing it, then you know that it must be good.
Well,
Right.
again, we'll wait for the fruit, pal. We'll wait for the fruit. But thanks for coming on, Taylor. I'll see you next
thanks
week.
for coming on. Like the haircut, by the way.
Thanks. My mom did it. My mom always does it. She does a good job. I like it. Didn't manage to get my face though, unfortunately, because the clippers died. They need to be charged.
Well, by this time next week, Taylor, you can show us the artwork on your face as well.
Artwork,
yeah, sculpted beard.
Hell no! I shave that. I shave that, man. I hate facial hair.
Do you?
Yeah, I hate it.
It makes you look. It makes you look like an elder statesman now. You know, in a good way. Gives you a mature look.
Fair enough. I don't like the feel of it. It's annoying. It's itchy. It makes my head feel hotter than it really should be. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just that's just my opinion.
Well, tell your mum to get the clippers on charge then.
Oh yeah, of course.
See you next week, pal.
Have a good week.
Yeah. God bless.
Okay.
2 hours done, mate. Been interesting, that. Some interesting topics, and we've got into some deep stuff. It was.
How many have we had on?
We've probably pushed 40 at best tonight.
Right.
But again, maybe people who were tuning in wanted to tune in to find out about the family law system and things like that. But hopefully, we'll keep Anthony and his family in our prayers, and hopefully we'll see him on here as soon as possible. But have you got anything to say in closing, my friend?
Well, Dorian says he feels dim after watching this episode. I don't know what he means by dim. Does that mean your light's been dimmed? Because you don't strike me as like we use a sense of dim as stupid. I don't believe.
We've drained his intellect, mate.
No, I doubt it. But have I got anything to say? No, I don't think specifically. I think it's been a wide-ranging conversation, covered a lot of bases. It's very, very difficult to change the script when, like I said last week, when you're focusing on problems often, create a mentality of producing more problems or anticipating problems, and solutions and creativity. Again, this is why word truth and meaning are not quite the same. And we can create our own meanings, but you can't really create your own truths. Truth is truth. And we need to align our meanings as much as possible with truth. But we don't always have direct access to truth, or it's not always obvious. So we've got to have our meanings in place. You've got to make a meaning in your own life. You've got to get a reason to get out of bed in the morning and do stuff. That doesn't matter whether you've got a faith or not. Faith could be a reason why you got out of bed in the morning, but it might not. You might have other things weighing down on you. So we've still got to focus on meaning, and we've still got to have purpose and direction in our lives. And at the end of the day, if we get too distracted with all kinds of rabbit holes, it can be distraction from moving forward with our purpose. So what I would say, I've had a productive week writing, amongst all the other things I'm doing. I'm working on the 3rd book in my trilogy. When that's out, that'll be the 10th book I've produced since 2018. And I think you've got to keep your productivity and your creativity and your fires burning. Quite apart from where you earn your crust or however your income streams come in. Outside of that, you've got to have hobbies, interests, tasks, focuses, good social networks. These are all protective factors for positive mental health and emotional well-being. Once those things disappear, in some ways, it doesn't totally matter whether you've got a handle on truth. If you're drowning, we all need support structures. We all need basic human encouragement, nourishment, and connection. We all need purpose, drive, goals. From our point of view, you know, from a Christian point of view, we see that aligned with the kingdom of God. Jesus said, I've come to give you abundant life if you want to take it. So obviously that's an extra added layer for Christians. But all humans, even who don't yet believe or don't yet recognize it, need to have positive structures for living, emotional, mental resilience, particularly in the world we're living in, and not to become one-dimensional and obsessed with truth. You know, where the truth and the life, truth, beauty, and goodness, according to Plato, it's a trinity. We need that balance. We need volume, height, length, and depth. Life is a three-dimensional contact sport. We've got to be prepared on every level, not just in our heads.
Very well said again, sir.
Cheers, pal.
Yeah, I'll speak to you after the show, mate, and we'll have a little bit more of discussion.
Look forward to the summation, pal.
Thanks again for tonight, brother. So we've come to the end of another show that we've gone into some very deep things as well as the light and fluffy things, because we do like to have this humour around all this, because it is laughable. It was like I was saying to Taylor, we're not laughing at what he's presenting or what he's believing or anything like that, because we've all got different angles on this. We're laughing at the absurdity of what they're talking about. You know, it's only a matter of weeks ago that you have big charities making public apologies for using the term cervix on a maternity ward instead of the transgender-friendly term front hole. You know, this is just beyond. You know, the world is slipping away, and you know the stuff we're talking about. It's real. It's not about having some truth or your truth. It's about the truth. At the end of the day, sort the liars out and the rest will be clear. And I think that's where we've all got stuck, to be fair. And we're all fighting on different levels. We're all trying to find our way. Even when I became born again Christian, I thought, that's it, I'm all sorted now. It wasn't all sorted. You know, you come under constant attack. It's not going to be an easy walk in this world. The devil loves his own. At some point, you've got to decide which side you're going to go for. And the problem being, even if you've not decided, you've decided. See you next week, guys. God willing.
Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Your gas is free, your gas is free, in a debt-based economy. Here's the Webster Report with Paul the Gasman Webster.